Welcome to tonight's event. It's exciting. It's about open source democracy. I'm Amy Loprest. I'm the Executive Director of the New York City Campaign Finance Board. And through our voter engagement campaign, NYC Votes, we are pleased to be a co-sponsor of this event. And I'm really happy that there's so many people here in the audience who are as enthusiastic about making democracy open source as I am. As you all know, technology is evolving constantly around us. It's changing the way we transact business and interact with the world. 20 years ago, I couldn't have imagined of such a thing as a smartphone, but now I can't imagine a day without it. However, until recently, this new technology hasn't really touched the way we engage with our government. And if we face facts, democratic engagement is a disgrace in this country. Here in New York City, we had an intensely competitive mayoral election in 2013. Still, only 19% of registered voters voted in the general election. The time has come to harness new resources and new technology to remedy that low voter engagement. Tonight, you will see demonstrations of 3 uses of technology that really work. The first is our NYC Votes application, which is a unique tool that allows voters to get information about voting and the candidates on their ballot. It allows voters to make and candidates to accept matchable contributions through the application. The second is Democracy Works, the team behind Turbovote. They are bringing voter registration into the modern age, working directly with county boards of election across the country to enable voters to register online and provide them with information they need to never miss another election. Third is the OSET Foundation, which is working on flexible, modern, open source, fully featured suite of software that powers elections. They're making it freely available to governments. Among their successes is VoteStream, an election results reporting system they've built that is in use in the state of Virginia. After the demos, we will have a panel discussion about using technology to improve democracy, moderated by John Kahaney of reInvent Albany. Thank you very much, John. Each of our teams that present here tonight will be available during our reception after the program to demonstrate and answer questions about their products. Before I go any further, I'd like to thank all of our sponsors, and I guess there was a graphic up here that showed the many sponsors, but I'm going to name them. The Brennan Center for Justice, NYPIRG, Common Cause New York, Citizen Union, reInvent Albany, Pivotal Labs, Beta NYC, Method, Tipping Point Partners, App Orchard, and especially New York Law School that provided this beautiful space. Now you don't come to hear from me. You came to see these demos, to learn about technology. I think that breadth of co-sponsors shows the dedication people have to this process and making democracy more open, using technology to reach people where they live. I want to now introduce our host for tonight, who's Art Chang. Art is not only a technologist and founder of Tipping Point Partners, but he's also a member of the New York City Campaign Finance Board and chair of our Voter Assistance Advisory Committee. I'll tell you a little story. When Mayor Bloomberg asked Art to chair VAC, he called me, and I was at a conference, and I was in a restaurant, and it was noisy, but he called me and he said, I really don't want to do this unless I can use technology to improve the way voters engage with the government. I thought, that's a great idea, let's do it. And from that very first conversation that happened in December 2010, grew the NYC Vote application. I'm really pleased that Art convened this program tonight, and now I'm going to turn it over to him to MC the rest of the night.
Thanks, Amy. All right, so I actually couldn't talk at all yesterday. But I like to sort of think, am I channeling somebody else? Can you think that maybe a little bit of Marlene Dietrich in here? I'll do my best. I can't promise I'll be as sultry, but I'm certainly not dressed for the part either. But anyway, welcome to tonight. This is really, in my view, and having been a relatively recent comer to this field since 2010, this is a rather historic moment. We haven't had the opportunity before to gather companies from around the country who are implementing real projects that are being integrated into the services that are being provided by government to better connect with their voters. It's been a long in coming. But we have some tremendous things here to see tonight, so I'm really, really pleased that you're all here and really pleased that people have made the effort to come from, in some cases, around the country to be here to present. One thing I wanted to say, I think, is that, Maya Angelou died last week, and a quote kind of reverberated around the Twitter sphere, and I won't quote it exactly, but I'll paraphrase it, that people may remember what you say, people may remember what you do, but they certainly will remember how you feel. And one thing that we forget is that technology is not necessarily about moving ones and zeros through glass fiber tubes, to quote our former past president, but it's actually the place, it's become a new public sphere. It's a place where the people and government actually interact. And so to the extent that we want to improve how people feel about government, and for government to deliver better services, technology must step up to do that. And so the efforts that you're going to see here tonight reflect that deep passion and by real people, real technologists building real things that have been integrated with real works of government. So I'm really pleased to do that. And so with that, I'm going to introduce my colleague and the Director of Communications for the Campaign Finance Board, Eric Friedman, and also Mike Schubert from Pivotal Labs, who will come up and do a presentation about NYC Votes. Well, maybe in advance, maybe I can just ask folks in the audience, what burning questions do you have that you'd like to be able to ask during this session that people can address?
Sure. I'm David Solomanoff, the president of the New York chapter of the Internet Society. My question is, how will these innovations actually allow a wider range of political debate and actual more radical or out-of-the-box solutions to be implemented in government?
Fantastic question. But it looks like Eric's ready. Ready to go?
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
Okay, terrific. All right.
Thank you. I'm Eric Friedman. I am Assistant Executive Director for Public Affairs with the New York City Campaign Finance Board. With me is, you can introduce yourself.
Michael Schubert. I'm a director for Pivotal Labs.
So this is exactly what a public-private partnership looks like. So it's just been a lot of fun going through this process, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit about what we went through to get to show this to you today. So just a little background about Campaign Finance Board for those of you who aren't familiar, although I see a lot of friends here. We administer what is the nation's largest public campaign finance program. So our system in New York City, I think it's safe to say that we're generally regarded as a model for what a clean, fair, participatory system for financing elections should look like for New York State and for all over the country. So we also, in addition to running the public financing program, have a complementary mandate through our Voter Assistance Advisory Committee to work to expand voter participation. So I want to start off by telling you a little bit about how the public matching fund system works, and I'm going to try to give you kind of the 60-second version. But it starts with a pretty simple idea. For candidates who participate in the program, when they raise contributions, small contributions in New York City, they get matched, $6 for every one. So that means for the typical city council candidate, if they raise $10,000 in small contributions in New York City, they get $70,000, essentially, to start their campaign. So to further reduce the power of special interests in our system, there are certain strict guidelines that all candidates must obey, must observe. For example, contributions from corporations are prohibited. There are strict limits on contributions from people who do business in New York City to prevent the appearance of pay-to-play. So I'm going to try to explain why we have public matching funds in two charts. First, as a result of all this, every neighborhood across the 5 boroughs is involved in funding campaigns, and that's what you see in that first map. That's a stark contrast to what happens with New York State offices, where there are no matching funds. And campaign giving is concentrated in less than a third of city neighborhoods. So as a result, right, the reason for this is that candidates running for state office can rely mostly on unions, businesses, PACs, and lobbyists for most of their campaign money. In New York City, candidates rely on, go figure, actual people. The system, it brings candidates closer to their constituents, and it's been a good thing for our politics. So here is our problem, or our challenge. It will surprise nobody in this crowd that candidates raising money over the internet has grown exponentially over the last couple of elections. It doubles about every election cycle to the point where in 2013, about 40% of all money raised by candidates in the system was contributed by credit card. The chart you're looking at shows the number of credit card contributions, and practically all credit card contributions are made online. But the number of contributions by credit card claimed for matching in each election since 2001. Sorry, so small dollar. So we match contributions up to 175. So when we're talking about small contributions, we're talking generally about $175 or less. These are okay. So yes, well, these are transactions claimed for match. So to get a little deeper into it, the first $175 of contributions are matchable, right? So anyhow, but this is basically gives you an example of the volume that we deal with, and I'll get into that. Our rules have made it pretty complicated for campaigns to accept credit card contributions and get them matched successfully. So, I mean, and this makes pretty good sense. You know, before the city gives you taxpayer money to match that contribution, we need some certainty, right, that the contributor is who he says he is, that he is a resident, he or she is a resident of New York City, that the contribution is being given in the contributor's own name, that we have the contributor's employment information, that we know whether or not he or she is doing business with city government. If the information isn't complete, that contribution might be invalid for matching purposes. So for the 2013 elections, more than 9,500, so if you look at that number, more than a quarter of all claims for credit card contributions didn't get matched, because our reviews done by our auditors uncovered some defect in the contribution or in the paperwork associated with the contribution. We need to fix that. These invalid claims, they cost campaigns money, but they also create a ton of work for campaign staff and not incidentally for the CFB. So we set out last year to try and make this kind of fundraising simpler and easier. This is the NYC Votes app. It was, because the rules are complex, it was a complex project in a lot of ways. We were really lucky to have strong leadership. Art from our board, provided a clear vision, as Amy said, from the very start of his time with us, for an Amazon easy entry point to the political process that anybody could access. Our executive director, you heard from her, Amy Loprest, embraced that vision and provided the leadership from the government side that really got all of our agency involved in building this thing. For instance, our technical staff needed to create a quick way to get the data that our agency collects into this in real time, right? So including names of candidates, their photos, their profiles, their videos they recorded with us, information about their ballot information, social media feeds, and the like. And
I mean, this is one of these. Usually, this is kind of the sticking point for most integrations with a lot of not just government, but just large enterprises. Is we have to get these two systems to talk to each other, and we found a way. It was actually kind of simple and in some ways somewhat naive. Of just what's the simplest thing that could work? Well, get some data, put it in some basic files. Don't build any fancy APIs or anything like that. Just what's the quickest way to get the data and get it in there to get going? Because at the end of the day, if we couldn't get the candidate data, and just by going by the path of least resistance, everything else was moot about this application. So that's the path we took, and that got us there in time for the election.
So we, just to kind of talk a little bit more about what was happening on our side, our candidate services staff, work directly with the campaigns, and they're intimately familiar with what the campaigns need. They were instrumental in making sure the complexity of the process stayed under the hood, right? They are our sales force and really got this out to the candidates and the campaigns. Because all of this is governed by, as pointed out, a very detailed set of laws and regulations, our legal team needed to be involved and was very involved at every step along the way to make sure that we stayed on the right side of all those laws and regulations. And most importantly, these guys with Pivotal and our project managers from Tipping Point worked very closely with our audit staff to understand the logic behind each of these reviews that they do, so that they could build the requirements of the audit into each transaction that went through the app, and the auditors get the information that they needed to do their work.
Yeah, and this was kind of critical in how we did it is important because we use an iterative process, which you think, why do you need these iteration when the rules are stuck in stone? The trouble is the rules are complicated. That means they get them wrong. Auditors, they forget things, and you have to go back and change them. So we focused on keeping the cost of change low and building in test cases, hundreds of them, so that we could guarantee that we were complying with the rules. And as we uncovered that we got them wrong, we were able to quickly change them and keep going.
But every step, as in building this contribution flow you're looking at, it was developed hand in hand with that audit team, to make it a kind of foolproof quality control built in. So as a contributor, right, you can't make a contribution, you can't complete a contribution if you don't input the information that is required by our rules.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing we could do in that situation is try to minimize it and try and working with method, creating a easy to use, user experience and really focusing on what is that minimum path, what is that path of least resistance to get through it, because if they stumble in the middle of it, they're going to walk away and you lose that contribution, and then that serves no one. So.
I mean, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the connecting to Stripe.
Sure. Yeah. So another interesting thing here was 2 years ago, the payment technology behind here is it's a company called Stripe, and they're used by a lot of startups. What was important, though, was a year and a half ago, Stripe released a new program allowing for third parties to take payments. Why this is important is because not Pivotal or the CFB or anyone else can actually take the money directly. It has to go directly to the campaigns. And Stripe piloted a program. We reached out to the founders. We got into the program, and we used it. And 2 years ago, that didn't exist, and this tool would not have been possible.
Yeah, from our end, you're coming through here as a contributor, right? So it allows you to create an account. So the system saves your information, requires you to enter it only the first time you make a contribution. And all this means, and all this work that these guys did on the back end means that the contributions received through the app are guaranteed to be well documented and are essentially pre-approved. Mike mentioned the folks at Method, and I think it's due to their work that really this feels simple, clean, elegant. The user flow and visual design, I think, was really important to making this right for the campaigns. So, if you put it all together, it's a system that reduces these invalid contributions I was talking about. It helps all the campaigns take the fullest advantage they can of the matching program, and will save countless hours of work for our staff and for campaigns. So we're going to build this up for the next election as kind of a pilot program for 2013. We're looking forward to building it up for 2017, and we hope all of you guys will stay tuned.
Thank you. Questions?
In terms of creating accounts and usernames and passwords, have you thought about, and downloading an app, have you thought about the fact that this is something that the average user might really just use once every 2 or even 4 years, and probably isn't going to remember their username and password, or might not want to keep the app on their phone for 4 years, or,
Sure.
It's
actually not an app. It's just a mobile website that just works on the phone, so that's why there's no app to install. And part of the reason for that was, the goal is to reach as many people as possible, so, make it a website, and that way it can reach everyone. You don't have to worry about, platforms and all that.
in terms of
Sure.
Well, look, part of the idea is that it's on, and hopefully, and this is, looking down the road, it's on the campaigns to sort of keep that engagement going with their contributors, right? So, I mean, that's what the future of this application is going to be. I mean, what you see, I think, is a great start, first few steps towards that.
Great questions. Thank you. Okay.
So the matching funds come from the city's general fund, and it's pretty simple.
I have to apologize that we're going to have to wrap up the questions for right now. There'll be another opportunity to ask those questions during the panel discussion. So I think we're going to move on to our next presenter. So thank you guys very much. So the next two presenters actually are going to kind of be on a spectrum along a similar theme here. One of the ideas, one of the thesis statements is that models for the way that web-based technologies exist today in the consumer world are actually ways that we can think about technology for the government, where the government interacts with people. So if you take the premise that the voting booth is actually checkout for democracy, what NYC Votes has done is actually created an e-commerce platform with a browse and shop for voters, but also merchant services via credit card processing for candidates. And as part of that tool, part of that effort, we realized that the membership in democracy is actually the voter registration. And so with that, I'm very pleased to introduce my friend and fellow New York City technologist, Seth Flaxman.
Great. Thank you. So my name's Seth. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Democracy Works. I'll talk about Turbovote in a bit. That's the first thing we built, and that's usually how people know us. But I started this nonprofit back in 2010 with my co-founder because we had this sort of question in our minds of like, why was the internet revolutionizing everything except the public sector? And that was really the question driving us at the beginning. And we knew, I think also like the other people who are speaking here today, that there was just so much technology could do to improve voting and improve our democracy, and so much like we had to do to use technology to improve voting. So the first thing we did was build Turbovote. And the idea was that we wanted to build a site where anyone could sign up one time online and then get all the help they needed to stay registered to vote and voting in all of their elections for the rest of their life. And so the way that works is, someone signs up, name, email, so we can stay in touch with them. They tell us where they're voting. And then what we do is we track all of their elections, from school board up through presidential elections. And if they need to register to vote, or if they need to vote by mail, we'll fill out those forms for them for their state. We'll email it to them, but we'll also mail it to them, snail mail style, with pre-addressed, pre-stamped envelopes, and then send text message and email reminders to make sure that they send in those forms by the correct deadline. So then if you're, and even if you're the sort of person who's already registered to vote and you like voting at your polling place, like a lot of the people probably in this room, you could sign up just for reminders to make sure that you don't miss, your local special elections, things like that, and know where your polling place is. And if you're the sort of voter who likes to vote by mail, we would make sure that you send in your application on time and you send in your ballot on time. And really, it's, the idea is anywhere we can take friction out of the system, through reminders, we try to do it. But we eventually came to a point where we realized that if we wanted to really fundamentally improve access to voting and improve the quality of the voter experience, we had to work hand in hand with local election officials, the sort of level of government that's actually delivering voting services to voters. So there's only so much you can do from the outside. So the first thing we did actually was work with Pew, take on a contract from Pew for the Voting Information Project, where we are now working with them to make sure that anytime someone needs to Google their polling place, that the state that is providing that official polling place information is able to really easily and seamlessly sort of keep that data open so that folks like Google or Turbovote can use it and provide that polling place data to voters. And through that, we were able to start meeting election officials all across the country doing that work. But the second thing we did is we worked with a research firm, Reboot, to really try and study the needs of local election offices, their technology needs. What are the pain points in their processes? What's their view of technology? What sort of technology do they need? And this is sort of the places where we did deep dives in our research. New York, that unfortunately we weren't actually. That's where our office is. So I'm not sure why that's on the map. But one of the big things we learned is that every office has a different process for almost everything. But that said, there's actually a lot of innovation happening. And so that's the first stereotype I would like to overturn. In a lot of these local election offices, there is a lot of innovation happening. The problem is that there isn't a good technology infrastructure for spreading best practices and scaling tools so that they can be used in more than one office. It's very localized innovation that isn't spreading nationally. Out of this process, we studied a lot of different ideas. And of all of the good ideas that came out of it, we decided to build a ballot tracker that we're going to be calling Ballot Scout, using Postal Service intelligent mail barcodes. And there are a few reasons we decided to focus on this piece of technology. The first was there's just a growing need. More and more people are voting by mail across the country. We're in New York here. It's one of the now minority of states where you still need an excuse to vote by mail. In the majority of states now, anyone can vote by mail, and it's growing in popularity. But at the same time, there's also a growing number of horror stories from election administrators about how it's going. We heard from one election administrator in Florida who said that they had found an entire flat of ballots stranded in a Jacksonville sorting facility until one of their clerks sort of figured it out and called and intervened. And it's the sort of thing that's keeping clerks up at night as more people are using this way to vote. And it's also keeping voters up at night. And that's the second thing that led us to build this tool. So in 2012, the #1 help desk request that we got at Turbovote were voters asking us, do you know when my ballot will arrive? And do you know if my ballot's reached the election office yet? And so those two things came together. And then we had a third thing that came together that really made us think that this is the tool we should be building. And it was the Presidential Commission on Election Administration, which recently came out with its recommendations. And one of them was exactly what we're talking about. The endorsing the expansion of increased safeguards for absentee voting, allowing the online tracking of absentee ballots, and county election websites where voters should be able to verify that their absentee ballot request was received, their ballot was mailed, and if there's a problem, to help clerks intervene so they can solve the problem before the voter loses their vote. So out of all of that, the first thing we decided to do was to hire an awesome product designer, a woman named Monica Childers, who's actually based out of Lawrence, Kansas. And she started putting together a brain trust of counties willing to teach us about how the absentee ballot process currently works in their offices. And so this is sort of the breadth of places that we were talking to in our brain trust. And we were really going for diversity. We were going for geographic diversity, demographic diversity, political diversity, diversity of resources. Some places have a lot of money and time, others don't. We wanted to see what the process looked like at places that had technical expertise in-house and places that did not. And after we sort of really dug into the knowing these processes in all these different places, we had our engineers learn everything about intelligent mail barcodes. This is a wonderful illustration. I'm sure all of you can now be experts after seeing this. After that, we were ready to start designing. So we selected counties to work with us if they were willing to collaborate in a very deep interactive partnership, where counties are testing giving feedback, and helping us design a tool that would actually be useful to them. So right now what we're designing, I said the ballot tracker, it's called Ballot Scout is the name, and we are working with these blue dots to figure out exactly how it's going to work. And it will be launched in these counties this November. So that's Martin County, Florida, Travis County, Texas, Johnson County, Kansas, Boone County, Missouri, Missoula County, Montana, Jefferson County, Colorado, Marion, Oregon, and Yolo County, California. And we're still actually looking for 2 more participants to participate this November if you know election offices that are interested. So after learning about the absentee ballot process and all the local flavor in these different processes, we were figuring out how to get mailing data in and out of our system and theirs, the level of integration necessary, and where they needed our help to implement barcodes. So we now have a basic prototype being tested by our beta partners in those 8 counties and working to build out additional features as we speak. The sort of minimal viable product for this November is going to include a number of administrative features, the ability to bulk upload mailing data into the system, generate unique barcodes for each mailing record, export that data as a file to be mail merged or print labels directly from the system, as well as a dashboard for administrators to monitor the ballots as they travel through the mail. We're then also building a lookup widget that can be embedded in any website, allowing voters to easily see where their ballots are in the postal system. And new features for 2015 are also sort of in the works. We want voters to be able to get text and email messages about this stuff in the same way Turbovote does that for everything else. And intelligent alerts so that we can actually sense when something's going to go wrong and make sure a clerk knows about it automatically. So we're excited to see how things go this November, and we'll be tracking hundreds of thousands of ballots, and is excited to sort of report back to this community after it's over. So thank you.
So we'll field a few questions. Okay, let's all the way in the back. Can you stand up at the microphone, please?
Oh, thank you. Is it possible to go one step further and vote online? What is the bottleneck to that? Like, why go through?
So we could have an hour-long discussion on voting online. It always becomes an hour-long discussion. I'll just quickly say that in terms of the technology, I don't think the technology is there to be both secure and anonymous. That's really the problem. When you're banking online, it's because it's not anonymous, and that's why they're able to do it.
What about Oregon? What about a state that does all mailing? Have you looked at that and compared that with some of these places?
Oh, yeah. Oregon's my inspiration, honestly. I remember seeing that happen when there was a ballot initiative in Oregon that moved them to all-mail voting in 1996, and participation jumped 10 percentage points in local elections because it made it so much more seamless. And so in some ways what we're doing at Turbovote to make vote by mail a more seamless experience no matter where you live is a hack to give everyone what Oregon has around the country.
Are you using it as a model?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm unclear. Are you tracking both? Are you tracking the outbound ballot as it goes to the voter, and also then the return mail pouch?
Exactly.
And or more stuff? You're only tracking the envelope.
We're tracking both. We want the voter to know when their ballot's going to come to them, and we also want the voter to know where it is coming back to the election office, so both ways.
Right, so there's no, in your anonymous, to go to anonymity, there's no ID on the ballot itself.
Exactly, yeah. That's how absentee ballot works. The external envelope has no personal identifiers on it.
Great. I think we have to cut off the questions right here. Sorry, Kathleen. So thank you, Seth. That was terrific. A hand for Seth. So, Seth, how long have you been doing this? When did you form Democracy Works?
We formed the nonprofit back in 2010, but January 2012 was our payroll anniversary.
Okay, so that gives you sort of, so NYC Votes and Democracy Works are the two babes in the woods, and OSET is actually the old man with a little bit over 10 years of experience doing this.
Really?
And it's so fun to have Greg on stage. I get to poke him in the ribs after being jet lagged. But I think one of the really cool things about OSET, and I think OSET is only going to have a 10 to 12-minute presentation, but this is a group to really get to know. When you want to think about, sometimes people say, well, voter participation is so low because people don't care. I think actually the opposite is true, that there's a whole host of people out there who care deeply and they don't have the right avenues to engage. And in the technology world, there are people like Greg Miller and OSET who have dedicated a decade or more of their lives to this mission.
Feels like it.
But to actually taking what they've learned and being there at the dawn of the internet, and having built some of the quintessential applications that we have come to define what the internet is all about, and apply that experience, that knowledge, to actually building something for the public good here with OSET. So with that, Greg, please, thank you for coming all the way from Portland, Oregon, via San Francisco for this.
Thanks, Art. I'm humbled by your introduction. I want to thank the organizers for asking us to come out this evening, and thanks to Seth, I've never been prouder to be an Oregonian. We have indeed enjoyed vote by mail, and I can attest to all that he suggests about it. Notwithstanding all those arguments that go with vote by mail, that there's some issues with that when you're voting at the kitchen table, but we don't have to get into that. So I'm going to run you through some things about us, since we seem to be a well-kept secret, and that's basically because we've been heads down in the Silicon Valley for a considerable amount of time. But we got our start in 2006. We are a full nonprofit based in the heart of the Silicon Valley. We're a bunch of former Netscape communications folks, if you remember those folks who were to blame for commercializing the internet. That would be us, although we tried to become social entrepreneurs in the post tense. We actually enjoy a really wonderful team now. There's a dozen folks in the core team, purebred engineers, hardcore, have been at this for a long time. We're trying to take some of our battle scars and lessons that we learned at Netscape and elsewhere and bring those forward. So contrary to what you just heard and what you might think, we have no immediate interest in iVoting, despite the deep history that you'll find in our team in internet technology. Although we do believe that the internet has a very important role to play today in elections administration. So why are we doing this? Real simply, we're challenging the status quo of what's going on in today's elections technology. And that got started back in 2006 when we started talking about some of the challenges that were going on with DREs at the time. And this all got born in a venture capital firm. And you see a direct recording electronics, I apologize. We got to start looking and listening to all of the problems that were with the machines that were born out of the attempts to replace levers and chads. Really, the stuff of our nation, democracy, we consider it critical. When you're talking about voting and how elections are done, it's the one thing that's core to our democratic process. We also believe it's just really too vital of an infrastructure to purely privatize or just completely commercialize. We know that there are largely 2 or 3 vendors that control the vast majority of America's voting infrastructure today. And there's just no market, I can tell you, coming from the VC world. There's no real incentive to innovate there. It just doesn't pencil out for them. And at the end of the day, we think everyone deserves a great experience in voting. So how are we doing that? 3 ideas: open data, open standards, and open source. More principles than practice, because our project is really about building what we consider fault-intolerant devices. But we are developing a new and innovative technology, our public trust of technology. We're delivering on a mandate one election officials refer to as VAST, that every election ought to be verifiable, accurate, secure, and transparent. So what does that mean? It means an entire elections technology framework, componentized and modular in nature. Again, if you think about sort of where we inherited some of our DNA out of Apple and Netscape and elsewhere, we had the privilege on this project to start with a clean slate. Our original backers said, imagine you have no incumbency, no legacy, no need to be backward compatible. You have a clean board. Start from the ground up. How would you build an elections administration and voting system if you could do it the way that we could achieve that vast mandate? So we are addressing the entire elections ecosystem, both voter-facing and administrative-facing, from registration on through the entire balloting process and all administrative processes that go with it. The idea is to end up with an open source election technology for any jurisdiction to adopt, and adapt, and deploy using their own IT resources or commercial IT services. So very important. We'd always love the message, contrary to what you may read or hear. We are not here and have no desire to destroy the commercial industry for voting and election systems. We're here to inject innovation into them and help them reinvent themselves. Linux did this for IBM. Linux did this and created a company called Red Hat. This project can do the same for the so-called industry of voting systems. We have to get to federal certification for any piece of that componentry that manages the process of ballots. And we're working with NIST to develop an entirely new model, a new way of thinking about how do you certify machinery. So we have two examples today that I'm going to race through so that we can get to our panel discussion. We're going to talk about two components of our framework. The first one really is a tool set for citizens that we call the Voter Services Portal. And I'd love to show you that real time, but I have a rule about presentations, which is never bring the internet into a presentation. You see how much trouble we have just keeping a screen up. So we also have a problem, too, that the Voter Services Portal I'm going to show you is actually in operation in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I don't want to touch anybody's. No live data can be harmed in the showing of this demonstration. That said, this tool set is available at the Presidential Commission's Elections Administration's Final Report website at MIT. We were asked to include our tools there in that tool set, so if you go out to the PCA report, you can find a prototype of this so you can see actually how it works. The second one is a tool set for processing and publishing election results we call VoteStream. That is funded in major part by the Knight Foundation, and I do have some stuff to show you today about that. Let's start with the voter registration or voter services portal. So the idea here was to create a convenient and easy facility to manage the entire 360-degree view of a voter's readiness to vote. So not only the processes of registration, but the processes of taking a look at a ballot, making changes to that registration information, all the things that you might do to get ready to vote. So it was initially adopted in the Commonwealth of Virginia during its early prototyping phase. It has greatly expanded there. We now have several jurisdictions around the country that are using different aspects of it. So, for example, in California, we're working with the COVER program there to get that voter registration database hooked up to third-party registrars so that we eliminate the errors and omissions that are reintroduced by an archaic process in California. When those boxes of voter registration forms darken the doorstep of the registrar in California, they actually rekey them in by hand, reintroducing all the errors and omissions that the great applications like Turbovote or Rock the Vote are designed to eliminate. We, about 4 years ago, introduced a barcoding mechanism so that what happens is when that thing prints out, it generates a barcode. A postulate record is sent to the state. Now that form does not have to be rekeyed. It only gets scanned. They capture the wedding signature in the process, ask the database, do you have a postulate record? Yes, we do. We're done. That took a process that the state of California estimated took somewhere around 700 man weeks to process all the new voter registrations in 2008 and dropped it down to about 17. So the idea of paperless voter registration is alive and well now in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we believe other states that will become true as well. If you have a driver's license, you're in. And then finally, tools for ballot preview, polling place location, onboarding, which is a brand new concept. I really wanted to bring you some examples of the onboarding system, but I just couldn't get my engineers to give me something they were willing to disclose today. But it's the idea, if you could think of a boarding pass at an airport, that's the concept that we're working with the state of Virginia on now. And polling place status. So this quick shot here of this interface, again, if you go to the PCA website, you can take a look at it and see how that functions. But the real interesting thing for us is, again, starting from the ground up, we're able to kind of be thinking kind of a way of objects. We have the ability to build up a set of components that we can reuse and do other really great things with. What happens is that this particular framework component allows us to introduce new innovations, and third parties can introduce new innovations to this too, because, again, it's open source. One of them, for example, is something called Busy Booth. So Busy Booth is basically Waze for polling places. If you're familiar with the Waze application, it's crowdsourcing for traffic on your favorite highway nightmare. The idea here is an app that we have under development right now. You're seeing some of the interface that allows an individual to literally check in for their polling place where they're going to vote. And during the time it takes them, from the time they check in to the time they get done, we get data from that. We combine that data with data that the election official has, and we're able to publish a status on how busy a polling place is. It's just one simple example of what we can do at VSP. So let's talk about VoteStream then. So VoteStream, which is again funded in part by the Knight Foundation, is turning out to be a really exciting application for us. Elections results are basically comprised of proprietary data. They're doled out to government and political party officials in the media in batch using formats that are difficult to get at, but they're designed for aggregate reporting. We learned elections results also include some rich participation performance data, if you know who to ask and how to ask for it. So we're innovating all that. Here's an open source platform that's designed to make all that data readily accessible to anyone, regardless of their device. So we're also in development, is in progress, though, to give us the rest of that story, which I mentioned, which is performance and participation data. So enough of me. In my last 3 minutes, I'm going to let you take a look at VoteStream.
Before I show you VoteStream, let's start with a look at typical election reporting today. This is the official homepage of Ramsey County, Minnesota. Elections information is available, including a page that shows results for elections since the year 2000, including this 190-page PDF for the November 2012 election. This information is useful, but imagine an interactive web-based application that takes advantage of the latest interface technology. Here, VoteStream is showing the November 2012 election results information for Ramsey County. It starts with a map display showing each precinct in the county, with results for the most prominent contest, in this case for U.S. President. The map is generated from the county's underlying data using the services of the Google Map API. Using the carousel at the left, you can scroll through contests, here, all 4 federal contests in 2012. You can filter the data to quickly find a specific contest, for example, the county commissioner contest or a school board election. You can switch categories, here I've selected state contests, and scroll using the carousel. Or you can switch to list view and see all 43 state contests at once. In map view, you can select all or part of the county and see the combined vote totals in the carousel, and use the map to select an individual precinct and see the votes reported for that one precinct. Or you can click through the map to see precinct-level results for the whole election. For journalists and researchers, we also provide an advanced filtering feature that enables any combination of choices, with the results available as exported data files. Also, we will be adding features for including participation and performance data in the advanced view. We made VoteStream work in several other counties, including Los Angeles County, which was an important part of our proof of concept, as it's one of the largest electoral jurisdictions in the U.S., with results data housed in one of the oldest legacy voting systems. Being able to export, sort, map, list, graph, and report that data suggests that VoteStream, even as a prototype, is flexible and can scale. Now, let's look at another possible deployment of the reporting system, which covers the entire state of Virginia, shown here in a statewide map, where clicking Fairfax County zooms in to show individual precincts, or you could view results with the same options as we showed for Ramsey or LA counties. A large deployment like this is feasible because Virginia's State Elections Board is already adopting the same standard data format that we co-developed for VoteStream. The VoteStream scoreboard is so flexible that we can imagine an even larger deployment, a scoreboard that can provide data on every contest and every precinct in the country.
So that is an alpha, and we're just getting started on the beta version of it, which will dramatically increase its scale. We have about a dozen states who are jumping on, wanting to be a part of where we're taking VoteStream. So that's VoteStream and the Voter Services Portal. I'm more than happy to discuss them offline, and thank you for your time.
Okay, we're going to be able to take just one question, but we can have more questions after the panel. Please.
So a lot of data like that is available from the Board of Elections, different places. You buy the CD, you download the data, you sort and clean up the data.
So that data is available, maybe not that I think that data is available. It's just a difference in the way that you present the data, or so it appears to me. So what did I miss? I love it. I think it's awesome. but how is it different than taking data and then importing it and putting it into your own, say, Crystal Reports type format and
Right.
looking at some graphs?
Right, fair question. And the keys are in the words you used, taking and importing. It's the level of effort and how it's done. So what's very different from this project than, say, something like OpenElections.net is that we are using a technology called APIs to actually speak directly to the voting systems today, taking that data directly from those voting systems into our system for pre-process and post-processing. We publish that or expose that in the so-called scoreboard that's publicly available, and then we have an administrative dashboard for elections officials too. So what we're doing is trying to take that heavy lifting of, you heard earlier, 3,000 jurisdictions and 5,000 ways of doing things. When the Knight Foundation got started with us, the first thing we did was start looking at the variety of structure, sequence, and organization of data for elections production. And we started working with some folks from AP and MSNBC on this as well. And what we found was that it is an unbelievable spectrum. This is when we said data standards, open data standards on an open source platform can level that playing field and homogenize that process.
How do you corroborate the data that you're getting from the election boards?
So we look to the elections boards. They are in charge of releasing official data, right? So that's not our charge. We provide them the API. It's up to them to give it to us, just like they would give it to any other source.
And then how do we corroborate the data that's behind us?
That is where the dashboard comes into play. You have the ability to flip the switch, if you will, to expose that data when you're ready.
Okay, we are going to have to cut off here and go to the panel. One comment I'm going to make, a couple interesting things that come up. Integration is super important. We go back to what makes software different from, say, a website. Is it actually an integration point? And integrations keep data alive. The other thing is that, and something that may come up in the panel, is that OSET Foundation, because of their work in trying to make this open source software available to government around the country, ran into the problem of actually open source licensing. And there are certain things that they wanted to be able to accomplish that couldn't be accomplished in the standard open source license types. And so they, at their own expense, commissioned a new license called the OSET Public License that I'm proud to say that NYC Votes is on its way to using to make NYC Votes open source as well.
I'm John Caney. I'm from reInvent Albany. I also co-chair the New York City Transparency Working Group, a coalition of nonprofit groups and civic hackers that works on open government and transparency here in the city. And on my left here is Mike Ryan from the New York City Board of Elections, Amy Loprest from the New York City Campaign Finance Board, Seth, you heard from Democracy Works, Greg, and our technologists, and then finally at the end here, Doug Kellner from the, who is a member of the New York State Board of Elections. So in this room, on this stage right now, we have representatives from the most important election campaign regulators in New York State. And what we're going to challenge them with here, with both questions from the audience and interaction with each other, is, how can we take this technology and put it to work tomorrow? And why can't we put it to work tomorrow if we can't? And we really want to understand the outlines of why that is. So we're going to ask each panelist to just speak very, very briefly about who they are and what they do and what their agency does in particular. And then we're going to have them speak to each other, because I think it's an amazing and wondrous mystery to many of us when we pull out our smartphone and we look at it, why government doesn't work that way. And we've got folks here who can explain that to us, and that is an unusual thing. So starting with Mike, and then we're going to go and we're going to really, really encourage discussion and getting to the hard questions here. So with that, let's get it going.
My name is Michael Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of the New York City Board of Elections. I'm also an alumnus of this institution. I was a practicing attorney prior to becoming the Executive Director, and during that tenure as an attorney, I spent a period of time as a Commissioner of the Board of Elections. But for tonight's purposes, I am a proud and lifelong New York Rangers fan. So, I'm hoping that we were able to conclude in time enough to at least see the drop of the puck.
That's a challenge. Well, you met me before. I'm Amy Loprest. I'm the executive director of the New York City Campaign Finance Board. Eric gave a little bit of description of the public matching funds program we do. We also do voter engagement and education. You might have seen, if you're a registered voter, you definitely saw our voter guide that we print and mail to every person who's a registered voter in New York City. So both online, video, and in print. So we do a lot of voter engagement and work. So I'm excited.
Technologist, we're going to skip over you and go straight to Doug Kellner, since we heard from you, and give us 90 seconds.
I'm co-chair of the New York State Board of Elections. The State Board of The State Board of Elections is its biggest function is actually running the campaign finance disclosure system, which takes almost half the staff at the State Board of Elections, and then it also maintains the statewide voter registration database. It's in charge of the system, but it's the counties that actually make the decisions as to who is lawfully a registered voter. And then we're also in charge of counting the votes for statewide contests and all contests that cross county boundaries. So later on we'll talk about some of the computer innovations that we're working on and what's still required.
Great. I'm going to start off with you, Doug, and then we're going to circle back here. And I'm going to put you on the spot because while I respect Doug's work tremendously, the agency that he has the honor of representing tonight has been lambasted by just about everyone using words like dysfunctional and backwards, especially when it comes to information technology. And I know that Doug cares passionately about this and about moving that agency ahead. So the question for you, Doug, is are you going to call up Greg tomorrow and Seth tomorrow and put them to work? And if you can't, why can't you do it? So people here understand the challenges that you face.
Right. The number one challenge is funding. It's not a lack of knowing what could be done. It's getting the funding to actually do it. And Governor Cuomo has been really great because he's the first in the last 2 decades to really understand that issue and was willing to put up the funding for 2 key projects. First was to allow online voter registration through the Department of Motor Vehicles, which was a project that cost $750,000, which seems like small change in terms of government operations, but the whole budget of the State Board of Elections is less than $5 million a year. So you can't come up with those kinds of capital funds without a governor who's committed to budget the money. The second thing he's done is to fund the update of the campaign finance disclosure system. For those who are the techies in the office, it works on the Delphi system, which was out of date 15 years ago. Nobody has the source code for the system, and everyone recognizes that it's not user-friendly, particularly for people who are filers, as well as the public who are trying to get data from it. So that upgrade is in the works and is about 1.5 years away before it'll actually be implemented. But we're very pleased that Governor Cuomo actually committed the funding to get that done. But there are a lot of other projects that are on the list of things that could be done if we had the funding.
Okay, let me ask Greg, and then we're going to go very quickly back here to New York City. Greg, how much would it cost to put in your whole open source platform and vote stream approach and the entire stack that you've talked about for New York State, roughly 19.5 million people? Just throw a number out there.
Well, so it's
ballpark.
It's honestly, there's a couple things to say right away. First off, there's a great myth that open source is free software. Okay, so the first thing I want to break the news to you today, coming from the world of Mozilla, open source is not free software. The license is free. So you're not paying runtime licenses every year and those annuities that we all in the enterprise software business rely upon. there are costs, direct costs in the total cost of ownership equation that are associated with standing that open source software up, just like there is with any kind of other software, whether it's open, disclosed, proprietary, whatnot. So number one, there are costs associated. Number two, we have a little axe to grind over our research for the past 6 years about how government procurement works, what are the real costs of things versus the true costs of things. What I can tell you tonight is that I come from the venture capital community. You might guess that we spent a few years banging away on business models about why we went with open source and what would it mean for Doug's group to actually adopt the elections technology framework. We are raising a total of $24 million to build that system end to end. And we are very confident after 7 years of being in the business that that's what we need to do it. So if you think about what people spend on voting systems, you can draw your own conclusions. We've been asked to testify in a couple of different settings of Senate hearings and whatnot at a state level, and what we've been able to report is, as best we can tell, that there's clearly about a 1/6 cost for, equation that seems to be running for most of the major parts of our system. So 24 million total cap is what it's taking for us to build that entire system end to end.
Okay. You didn't answer the question, but you gave a great answer to a different question I didn't ask, but I liked it. We're going to come back to you, Mike, which is it money? Is it governance and the political system? Is it mindset? What stops you from calling up Greg, Seth, and Art tomorrow, or maybe you will do that?
I would say it's all of the above. And that's not a cop-out answer. It's money, but if you take money and throw money at a system that's not working and you don't work to fix it, money alone won't fix it. The procurement process is certainly an issue. It was a process that was born of all good intention to level the playing field and to make government procurement available to everyone and to make sure that people weren't shut out and to really give a fair opportunity to everyone. And what's happened is it's become a monolithic thing that is insurmountable sometimes. However, the governor has also passed an executive order that has opened up that process somewhat and made it easier. For example, if in years past, if New York City was going to make a procurement, it was a New York City procurement. We now can procure from another county's procurement. Now, that sounds like a little thing, but it's really a big thing. So if Rockland County did this great thing, we don't in New York City now have to do it all from the ground up again. We can piggyback off that contract as long as it meets our requirements because a procurement was already done and a governmental entity already vetted it. And so, the entire 62 counties can share in each other's work. That is a tremendous innovation and a tremendous step forward. Training is always going to be an issue. And I have my MIS director here, Steve Ferguson, and he can tell you the challenges associated with trying to build things, from the ground up internally, because one of the things that you need to be, because of the scarcity of resources, is as vendor independent as you can possibly be. What ends up happening when you try to be vendor independent is it takes longer because we don't have a sufficient MIS staff. Steve, how many guys you got? He's got 10 at the tops to try to build, very complex systems, from the ground up. So that all of the above answer is as honest an answer as I think you can give.
That was an awesome answer, and you covered it. Couple things, just so the audience knows. We have 3 agencies here, 2 of which the Board of Elections for the state and the city have political appointees and are bipartisan. They are split by party and appointees, and 1, the Campaign Finance Board, which is a little different and has stronger staff control. So that might be an important factor in how nimble they are and how quickly they can adopt things. Shareware, civic shareware, or being able to use the same platform. Does the state talk to the city about software procurements and ways that you could share or do the same thing? So you would ask
all the time.
All the time. Okay. And have you procured anything together or with the same standards or even the same data standards?
A lot of things you have to do it. So, for example, the voter registration databases have to be able to talk to each other. The voting equipment purchased by the city has to be approved and vetted for certification by the state. So it's absolutely essential that there be constant communication and that the two be working in
So
step.
one of the issues that Greg pointed to, or one of the concepts which was 3 opens, and open standards, open source, and
well, and common data format is also very important.
And open data. And so the state and the city talk to each other about metadata standards and data standards for voting reporting and how you do it?
That's my understanding. Steve Ferguson right there, who's the city MIS director, is on the front line of actually doing it.
Okay. And then back to Seth, who has an incredible 50,000-foot view of the American voting system, having talked to all these different election administrators. Seth, what allows some local boards of elections to act and to do innovative things and to adopt new technologies quicker and to take risks? Is there anything in common? Is there anything that when you live in Brooklyn and you think about New York and New York City, and is there anything that Kansas is doing or the local election boards? You must have some insight into that.
That's a good question. I'd say some of the common denominators we found in all of them is that, one, it's not that folks are more willing to take risks. First of all, everyone is sort of very wary of making mistakes. Voting is very important, and you need to really make sure that everything is locked down. So I would say one of the limiting factors is that they want new technology, a lot of these folks. They're interested in innovating, and they're interested in technology that serves voters better, but they're mostly not finding a market of new technology for them to adopt. So I actually do see that there's more demand than supply when it comes to use, this is something Greg was saying, there's 2 national commercial vendors that serve everyone, and they're almost never come.
So ES&S, Dominion, and then Hart InterCivic would be the third. There's really 3. I call them 2.5 because my prediction is in the next 18 months, one of them will fall. I won't say who. I think it's 2 or 3, but one of them's going to fall.
Thank you. And I'd say that the second part of it is that there's this cycle where because governments really don't have a lot of money to spend on this technology, VCs don't invest in companies that build new technology for them. And so it becomes a vicious cycle. And so that's one of the things I think Greg and I are both trying to do to break the cycle, is being a nonprofit tech startups where we are trying to build technology that is affordable for government, because we know that there actually is demand there, and there's demand from voters and from government.
Yeah, John, I was going to add that you also have 2 nonprofits who have no political appointees and are nonpartisan on the stage, and that's an important thing. Like Seth, we're actually, and I didn't make this point earlier, we are stakeholder driven. So we are stakeholder driven. We put stakeholders at the center of our project, not source code. So we have over 220 elections officials from 24 states around the country who participate in a process called RFC, Request for Comment. Everything about our architecture that we didn't even go into tonight, we didn't need to, it's out of scope, has been defined by those officials. So for example, our system says that a paper ballot shall be the ballot of record. Regardless of whether a ballot marking device generates it, a paper ballot will be a record. So we are looking to those people like Seth is, and they're driving what we're doing, because they don't have an R&D shop. They don't have an IT infrastructure, as you point out, to sustain any kind of an in-house development. Not everybody's LA County, which is probably the one exception in this whole discussion. So we are, as a nonprofit entity, a Silicon Valley-based R&D organization whose mission is to research and develop innovations and make those innovations available in the public trust.
Now, an interesting thing here is that we do have a lot of national leadership on the stage right now. And Amy, you wear a different hat some of the time, or were when you were at Kogel. And so I was wondering if maybe you could just talk about how much of a community is there here? I doubt people in the audience know how common things like this are. I mean, is this a club that people get together all the time and drink beer and exchange ideas, or is this a rare thing? Does New York talk to LA? Does LA talk to Kentucky? How often does Doug talk to the guy in Tucson? How much discussion and exchange is there, and how often do best practices spread? Or, is it Johnny Appleseed here and here and here who are running around and sharing stuff? What does that look like in this country?
And what's Kogel?
Okay, well,
We'll get to it.
that was going to be what I was going to first explain to you. COGL is an international organization, the Council on Government Ethics Laws, and it covers a broad range of practitioners in government operations. So they're practitioners who work in campaign finance administration, elections administration, ethics administration, and lobbying, and so and freedom of information. So they work in all those disciplines. And I would say, in the short answer to John's specific question about how often this happens, I'd say not enough. I mean, I think there's always room for more. I think that COGL, as this international organization, does do a lot of work to share best practices, but I think a lot more can be done, especially as far as technology is concerned. It's a lot of, I mean, you think about the people on the stage and working on elections administration, just one aspect of the government interface, but ethics administrators who collect those forms that government officials fill out to show how much money they are making, or lobbyists have to register. I mean, there's a million different jurisdictions that have lobby registration. Many of them are, you think that elections administration is antiquated. A lot of those are like, everything is done handwritten on paper and data entered, or maybe not even data entered, filed in a file cabinet in a lot of jurisdictions. So there's a lot of room for improvement. I think that I was immediately, the first time I ever even heard Glenn speak on the phone a couple weeks ago, immediately thought he has to come to the national conference that COGL has and, arrange for that to happen. So I'm happy that he agreed to come. But Greg. What?
You said Glenn. You meant Greg.
I'm sorry. Okay. It's okay. I'm very, very bad with names, especially people.
Okay. Everyone who knows
called
me, a lot of
people
things.
have
It's
the
fine.
same.
Well, let me, so that helps us understand more. I was wondering, Doug, if you had questions at all, like one question that jumps out, he's like, wow, I've got these guys next to me, I never get a chance to talk to these guys. Is there one thing that you would ask these guys who travel around the country talking to the other? Only one, Doug. But if there's something that jumps out, is something that, here's something that I wonder about, because I saw you watching the presentation, and I know you were pretty interested.
Well, there are lots of things, but the actual note that I wrote down is to check to find out if the new election night reporting system that the state board is implementing now will be able to set up the data in a format that will be usable for the system that Glenn? Great.
Now I'm confused.
You're right.
OSET.
That Greg presented before. So
it's a memorable name.
But it's so that's the kind of thing. You take down notes and look at that. But I have 3 daily blogs on 4 daily blogs on election law, election administration, and election verification issues. Plus, there must be half a dozen other things that come out less frequently than daily. So there's lots of information out there. The key thing is making sure that the staff know what you're interested in, and so that's one thing. And then the second is funding. In fact, funding is everything on this. And I know that Mike Ryan has the same problems. We all have great desires, but we're competing with lots of other needs. And if it comes down to building a school or building a road or paying for easier election administration, we often lose out.
Well, it's an interesting thing that procurement and funding have come up a couple of times here. And Mike, I'm going to let you speak to that in one second, but I just wanted to note that I doubt that Seth and OSET and are responding to very many RFPs. And it seems like they're using more of an opt-in model, or kind of a running around and talking to people and seeing who's receptive and who wants to be a partner. So I just wanted to think about that for a second. I believe New York State has a big RFP coming up for significant technology upgrades, and one wonders who's going to respond to it. Will it be the OSETs and the Art Changs and the Turbovotes?
John, I'd like to weigh in on one thing about that because it goes back
Please.
to something you said earlier. It gets back to the procurement issue. There are RFPs out there. So I can give you one case study that Seth and I and organizations like us are going to run into and continue to run into. A state had a mandate to put a voter registration system, online voter registration system, in place by a certain date. It's part of HAVA compliance. They did the traditional thing of doing the RFP, et cetera, et cetera. They were looking at spending about $35 million. They knew well that our technology with their systems integrators would run 1/10 that cost. There's one little problem. In that state, the procurement requirements require us, if we wanted to participate in any capacity, to post a $50 million surety bond in order to play. That procurement regulation erects a barrier of entry to any innovator who is not Accenture, IBM Global Services, EDS, and all the usual suspects, Catalyst et al., who come in and do that for $35 million. And, of course, they cost overrun. It doesn't get delivered. All sorts of things happen. Healthcare.gov. So there are procurement problems there that are letting people, who could probably innovate can't get in the door to help because of those procurement. And I don't mean to call it healthcare.gov. It's a very important project. But there's procurement regulations that have to be addressed. The second problem that goes back to the theme that you started with, citizens are using 20th century technology to talk to a government who uses 19th century technology to respond, right? Or 21st century technology to talk to them, 20th century technology to respond with 19th century processes. So there's two things there that I think have got to get fixed, right? You've got procurement challenges and you've got to catch up.
So this raises a big question. So Art, and then Mike, and I guess what I want to hear is the political pressure and the everyday experience of the public that's carrying their smartphone translating into, money, pressure and will to change things, and why the heck not if it's not happening? But Art, please.
So the additional part about procurement that I want to point out here is that, the procurement of technology today is almost entirely based upon an archaic definition of how you build software. That it tries to define a product, it tries to predefine the business process, it tries to establish all the requirements and exactly how it's supposed to be done, and then there's this onerous definition of what acceptance is supposed to be all about. And we know in seeing project after project from healthcare.gov to New York City's 911 system that process is inherently broken. And so the way that contemporary technology gets built today, and I think Pivotal Labs is actually over there is one of the foremost progenitors of this. They've actually built some of the foundation for OSET technology and NYC Votes, is that you have a notion of a minimum viable product. That actually the most important thing is what a product does to activate the relationship between the user and the person who's trying to serve them, and how technology can actually rethink those 19th century business processes and enable a much flatter, much more collaborative, less workflow dependent process to happen, at least for the experience of the user. And so until we actually figure out how you redo procurement to enable government to actually access innovation in the process of building technology, it's going to be very difficult to get it in the actual acquisition of it.
Right, great points. So, Mike, is it translating to you and that public frustration with that gap into something that you can channel and use to make change?
Well, the answer is I'm not certain, but I do want to say one thing lest we think everything is all gloom and doom. March the 11th of this year, New York did a cutover, and New York City, and we are accepting online voter applications from the Department of Motor Vehicles only, with no paper backup. That happened March 11th. I was on a conference call today. There are 19 other agencies in the city of New York that are legally mandated presently to do some form of voter outreach, and the conversation has begun. How do we integrate those other agencies? For example, in my own building, some millionaire's own building, 42 Broadway, where our office is housed, is the Department of Consumer Affairs. There are people coming in and out of that building every single day applying for licenses and all kinds of things, and we're not integrating with them. they're 2 floors below us. So that's another brick wall that we have to move through. But the funding issue is really a problem, and the procurement issue is a problem for exactly what Greg said. One of the conversations that I've had with both of our vendors, both Dominion and ES&S, the business model for which these machines were, the voting machines were obtained, is unsustainable. There's not going to be another Harvard grant of that magnitude that allows for the purchase of the next generation of this technology. It's not coming. It was a one-time event that was responsive to what appeared to be a national problem that was probably more isolated than national. But in any event, that's what we're stuck with the Congress, and they did it once. They're not coming back to the states all over again with heaps of cash to redo these things. So what's going to be incumbent upon these vendors is to rework their business model and to build from within an incentive to innovate, because the incentive to innovate is not going to come from without. The incentive to innovate in private industry comes from a profit motive and from some, hey, if we do this new great thing, we're going to make these millions of dollars. That's not happening in the election system and the election process. So, as much as it's incumbent upon the election administrators to make that case, it's incumbent upon the profiteers from the administration of elections to make the case for themselves. So it's our business partners have to do at least as much of that carrying as we do.
Great, great comment. So we're going to open it up to the audience, and I just want to say a couple things quickly, that we'll be here with many of our panelists until close to 8 tonight, so there'll be a chance to just chat with them one-on-one, and so some more detailed questions that might be appropriate to one-on-one you can save. We brought out a ton of different points here, and we're just going to try to cover as many things as we can quickly. Man over here in beard in back. Yes, sir. You, please. You, stand up. Yes.
Lynn.
Yeah, I'm just curious, actually, based on the point you just asked, how much money, or was any money available from the Stimulus Act in 2009 for advancing election solutions in America?
0.
Great question. Other, you, sir, black shirt.
I just wanted to say, I'm Steve Adler, and I work for IBM. You mentioned a couple of times, so I just wanted to respond.
We find the procurement process just as frustrating as you do, and that's why we're supporting there's a great World Bank initiative to open up procurement processes. The World Bank is sponsoring an open data standard for so that governments around the world publish their procurement processes in open data. We're supporting that. We think it's a good idea. There's $9.5 trillion a year that's spent by governments in procurement. Aside from the RFP process and the open tender process, most of it is opaque and hidden, and we think that it would be beneficial for society, for government, and for private business if that was opened up entirely.
Great point. And just to build on the de Blasio administration, the Cuomo administration, the state, the city comptroller have all made very direct remarks about procurement and the need for procurement reform, and so it's definitely on people's minds. More questions? You, sir, please.
Yeah, I just, with the NYC Votes app, the same kinds of questions with other apps, except to the next level, because as it was being discussed earlier, the issues of anonymity with voting. It looks like that's collecting a lot of personal information in one place, and what's being done to secure it.
Okay.
One of the things we do is try not to keep pretty much any of the information. A lot of payment information goes to the payment provider. So that goes to Stripe. We never see it. We get a transaction ID. So we have none of that details. The rest of it, though, does have to go to the Campaign Finance Board. And so what we try to do is encrypt as much of it as possible and send that over to the CFB so that we don't want it. We don't want to touch it. And there's also a risk of a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act request, that another candidate, if they wanted to, could make a request to try and get it for competitive advantage. So we are very sensitive to that fact.
And by the way, if you make a political contribution, it's online, and including your address and who you are is part of transparency around the election system. So it's all there already. Yes, you, sir, in the back, please.
So a lot of the, can't follow all of the bureaucratic stuff, but a lot of what you're talking about seems very general to government. And my question is basically, what makes New York State and New York City different? Because just in regards to reporting election results, not everything is LA County, but I can get precinct level results in Arizona going back to 2004, 1 CSV per county, a common format. For a while, at least, you could get live updated maps on election night, precinct level in North Carolina and Kentucky. Texas and Minnesota have statewide CSVs with their election results. So I don't know if those places have different procurement policies or what, but I do know that a lot of people think that New York City is behind on that sort of thing. And comma separated like a spreadsheet with.
Okay, so we'll have the state and the city answer that question separately. Why are we different? Are we behind? Are we the same as everyone else? Doug, you want to start with the state?
We're clearly behind on it, but there was a law passed 2 years ago requiring that election results be posted on the internet. And the state has been working with the counties and New York City to comply with that requirement. And, Mike can talk about what the city is doing, but certainly getting the data in an open format that can be communicated from county to state and made more usable for people who access it on the internet is a priority.
Well, the answer is New York City is different. New York City is different primarily because every other jurisdiction operates on a county-by-county basis. New York City is a municipal corporation consisting of 5 counties. So the complexities of the management of the process is certainly different here in New York City than it is anywhere else, and we're unique in that regard. With respect to the reporting, we did report out on election night as required by law. Often with the funding issue, getting back to the funding, election administrators, not just New York City, wait until they're mandated to do something because they don't have the funding to do it until they're mandated to do it. So yes, we are behind, in part due to the legislative process. But we did report out this past general election, live election results as they came in an aggregate way with a refresh every 10 minutes. The work is being done now to make sure that we can break that out into the various subdivisions, and we're looking to cut the refresh from 10 minutes to 5. So we're in the process of doing that. Clearly, we would like to do more. One of the things that we've done that I got to tell you, and I really have to commend Doug Kellner and the State Board of Elections for helping us cut through the bureaucratic red tape with respect to reporting. The way that the DS200s, the machines that we use, was set up was such that you had a primary portable memory device, which is essentially an encrypted flash drive. And we had to wait until the results tapes, of which there were 3. Now, when you take New York City, a place like Co-op City within New York City that has 22 election districts within one room, waiting for 3 results tapes to print out before you could pull a portable memory device was absolutely crazy. We worked together, Doug, myself, the State Board, our folks, to really get this done. And the State Board turned the approval around in less than 4 months for a process that usually takes 12 months. And I really have to commend Doug on that. And the significance of it is now we can pull the portable memory device before the tape prints because it's going to print off of a separate memory card internal from the system. That's going to allow those sticks to get into the stream of commerce, whether we ultimately upload directly from the poll sites or we continue to use the police precinct format that we have presently. In any event, you're talking, I would say, conservative estimate, at least 40 minutes earlier, these portable memory devices will be on their way to where they need to go to get the results going. So this coming September primary is the first time that we're going to be utilizing that process moving forward. The other thing that we did yesterday, which was enacted by the board and also in compliance with a recent change in state law, we used to print the results tapes, 3 of them, 1 for the police and 2 for us, by election district, meaning that all of the election districts were shown on these results tapes. We are now going to print 1 results tape, aggregate. So, candidate Smith, 500 votes. Not candidate Smith, 100 votes in ED1, 100 votes in ED2, 100 votes in ED3. And we're going to print 1 tape. So all of that extra time at the back end of the process on election night is going to be saved. And we're doing those 2 things simultaneously in advance of our second most busy election cycle for the... Yep. Not by poll site, by scanner machine. So each machine is going to have multiple election districts in it, and it's going to get a summary tape. So if there's 5 machines in a site, you're going to get 5 tapes. But they're all going to be printing simultaneously because...
Every ED on every machine?
Nope. Every candidate's name is going to have an aggregate total. We are still going to report out the results, the unofficial results, by election district, the way we always do. It's just that the tape that we need to attach to the return of canvass will be an aggregate tape, no longer an individual, 9-mile-long tape that you got to tape up to the top of the ceiling and have it stretch all the way down like Rapunzel's hair from the tower, halfway across the room.
This is what progress looks like here in New York City. You, ma'am.
It also speeds the auditing process to do it that way as well, and that's something that, again, the backroom stuff. But the city board actually audits the count of the paper ballots to reconcile the machine count against the actual paper ballots after every election, and that process will be speeded up this way too.
My name is Tanya Mielich, and I've been working in New York State election politics for 40 years. And I would like, I guess, the New Yorkers to comment on the fact that at its base we have a dysfunctional electoral system that is kept that way because the political people who are in charge essentially want a status quo. So that all of this other stuff that we're talking about really doesn't change very much, change some of it, and New York City is finally breaking loose until we change some of the way we do things. In other words, the problem is an electoral structural problem that relates to drawing of lines, election law, and so on. So I would be curious as to how the panel thinks you could change this
So I think
system.
you made a statement rather than a question, and we're not. And you
I
also
did.
introduced.
I ended
let me
it with,
let me just for the sake of,
Right.
of trying to keep people. So your statement was a good one, and I think people are concerned about things like electoral districts and all the other problems with democracy. But you asked a very, very broad question, and we're trying to keep them
I
specific
understand that,
and
but
lively.
the context is no money, and the reason there's no money is because the legislative
Okay, but
system
this is
dysfunctional.
this is a statement. So let's move.
How
let's-
do we
That's
get money for you people?
I'll buy you a beer afterwards, and we'll talk about this. But I think that you raised excellent points, but they're very, very big points. So more questions. You, sir, in the way back.
Am I on? Yeah. Hi. I have a very specific follow-up question for Doug. Right now, this state publishes election results data on their website in PDF format, which people don't like very much because PDF isn't really machine readable. Presumably, they have like an Excel document somewhere they don't publish online, or someone is manually inputting that into like a Word document and then publishing it as a PDF and then putting it online. Why doesn't someone either take the CSV, which already exists, and put that online, or type it into a CSV and then make it into a PDF and CSV and publish both online? That seems really cheap to do.
Why isn't there machine readable data instead of a PDF?
That's exactly right. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good point, and that's the note I wrote down during Greg's presentation, is to follow up on that, because you're not the first to raise it, but Greg seems to have a software solution that might not be so
Great question, and
difficult
one
to
that
implement.
many people are also agreeing with. Yes, keep going. What's the do we get an answer for that, Doug, or is that something machine readable instead of PDF?
Well, I mean,
is that soon?
obviously we have at the state. They started out doing these with Excel spreadsheets that they would print. I guess you could always foil or send an email and ask them to send you the Excel spreadsheet. But getting the I got it.
So let me follow up on this. Well, let me just follow up on this. So this is a particularly big issue with all forms of open data and getting the data in a PDF image file, and then people have to so-called scrape it, run Perl script or whatever script they're using through it. The question is you probably have it in a database format that exports to CSV as a simple press a button option. So why is it being exported? A CSV is just a spreadsheet format, comma separated format. It's a basic spreadsheet. You can read it on any spreadsheet program. So why?
I am not familiar with the technical details of the new system that's only being implemented now for the reporting. Prior to last year, the counties sent us the data by hard copy, PDF files that we would then manually copy into spreadsheets. That's how it worked until last November. And as I say, Steve probably knows the technical details of the switchover.
So,
right.
Mike, do you want to
With
comment?
respect to our election night data, we can make available to anyone who asks a username and password to access the data on election night. Nobody's really ever asked us for it. It's only happened, recently that we've turned this on. But in the past, historically, the Associated Press has been the conduit that gives out this information. But I can tell you that there were two outlets that asked for it last time around. They didn't use it. One was New York 1, and the other one was Channel 11. Now, we made our data available to them. And the idea moving forward is New York 1 tells me they want a partnership with CUNY and do interactive heat maps, as the election results come in. But certainly, and it's not in a PDF form. No, it's our online feed that's getting refreshed every 10 minutes that could be made available, and that could be done now with respect to Pardon? That's the city. Keep in mind, and just I'm not here to defend Doug Kellner, but the State Board of Election doesn't actually administer the elections on election night. They're the passive recipient of a lot of information that comes, at them from 62 different counties all over the state. So in terms of directly being able to respond, I'm in a much better position ultimately to hear your request, amend the system, respond to you than Doug is. Doug's got some cat herding to do to get that all accomplished, to get the 62 counties to do the same thing.
So we're in overtime, and we're having an excellent Q&A here with the audience, and we were going to finish up and heading to mingle time at 7:15. We're going to keep going just for a little bit more, but succinct, direct questions that we can answer quickly. You, sir, right in front.
So I have a question. Everyone's mentioned funding, and I have a question for Mr. Ryan with regards to the electronic transmission of voter registration forms from the DMV to the City Board of Elections. Have you found that moving to an electronic system has eased the operations in any way, or perhaps allowed for efficiencies? Because it seems to me like it could actually save money to move away from some of these processes where you're inputting things from spreadsheets and you're having people do data entry all the time. So has that been experienced?
It is absolutely more efficient. The problem that we have is when we need to realize the efficiencies, we're not going to realize them, and I'll tell you why. DMV registrations come in a steady stream throughout the year because people apply for driver's licenses. Where we hit a wall is when folks do voter registration drives in and around election times, when we're at our busiest. And we now have to get all our machines deployed and get all that stuff ready, and then process this influx of paper to get people on the rolls in time for the election. So what the discussions that I had earlier today, and what we need to concentrate on moving forward, is how do we do the rest of the process the same way that we do it with the DMV? Get the rest of the process electronic. Other agencies, but not only other agencies. We have to make the voter registration process more available to the general public, so that I envision a future of, let's say CUNY does a lot of them, right? We'll give them a shout out, as the younger people say, right? They take a big stack of they take a big stack of our voter registration, and they fill them all out, and then we get them back in a big stack. I envision tablets, smartphones, etc., doing all of that data entry, and have them, these young folks that are getting registered, register in a way that they're comfortable registering. I have a 19-year-old daughter. She just finished her first semester at Hofstra, two-time Dean's List, but she's not here. But in any event, I hand her a piece of paper to fill out a form, and she looks at me like I have 10 heads. But if I told her the form was on her phone and she could click away with her thumbs, we would get it.
Mike, one of the unfunded projects that we're both pushing for is to make the online voter registration databases more readily available to election officials. So you don't need the CUNY voter registration drive if when you're right there at the CUNY website signing up, you can see whether or not you're already registered. That's one of the things that one of the savings we've gotten through the DMV website. But right now, there's no funding for that project, so that's something that's on the to-do list. It would also speed up at the poll sites if the poll workers didn't have to thumb through the book, but could just bang in the first 3 letters of the person's last name and have the electronic registration come up.
So we're going to go to Amy, Art, and then we're going to have 2 more questions, and then we're going to go mingle.
I'm just going to, just give one quick thing. Our agency, in addition to a lot of the other things we do, is NYC Votes is our voter engagement, and we're charter mandated to manage this program of all these local agencies doing voter registration and engagement. And so we are, very excited because I think that somewhere along in this discussion, someone mentioned about, why do you have an app that, for something that only happens every 2 years, every 4 years, whatever. It's really trying to get people to understand that the process is ongoing. There are elections almost every single year in New York City, and that, that you don't have to register to vote. The deadline is, the deadline for registering to vote for the congressional primaries was last Friday. You don't have to register on Friday. You should have known about it and been informed and kept being informed. And that's one of our really big goals that we're working with the Board of Elections. We're working with these city agencies to really get people to be engaged kind of on an ongoing basis. So you don't have this. Even if you had to do it in paper, you wouldn't have, a whole big volume right at the busiest time.
Yeah, so I want to address the procurement question a little bit. So for civic technologists who are in this room, how many people would volunteer to help Doug? Right.
Anything.
Okay, so
how many of you would go to Albany? No.
So Glenn, Greg, so how much would you say NYC Votes would have cost to build? So NYC Votes cost. Okay, thank you. That's a lot higher than I would have put it. But NYC Votes cost the taxpayer exactly $0. And the process that we used to do this, I think, is really interesting and worthy of study. That in 2011, we went to a civic hackathon and presented this vision. And a set of local hackers, Nathan Story is back there, took our vision and brought it into an instantiation in a live working demo app that then provided the impetus for the Campaign Finance Board and the team at the Campaign Finance Board to get behind it. And that was used to catalyze a team of experienced technologists in New York City, including my own firm. Michael Carlson over there was our project lead. Pivotal Labs, Mike Schubert was our tech lead, method design firm, who saw the need to fill this vacuum and came together and actually built something of enterprise quality for the public good for free. And so when I say that, I don't think that actually this is the last time that this will happen, because I think that the people are out there to take these needs and take their frustration with the system as it exists and find like-minded people on the government side that they can interact with to bring something meaningful to fruition. And so when we think about what it costs, I would say, well, let's figure out what it costs all of us in society to can maintain the status quo, and are there people who have the capabilities who are willing to actually dedicate some time and resources, some meaningful time and resources and expertise to solving some of these issues.
Great remarks.
And if I could just jump in one last thing.
Please.
The Presidential Commission report showed us that folks don't go to government websites for government information. One of the biggest things that we could do that will cost really nothing is better government private industry partnerships with the search engines to direct them, to help us direct the voters to the information, the wealth of information that's already available that's on our website.
I mean, another thing, I just want to say is that it also, from the government side, it really, I think there is a mindset that has to be changed, that not everything has to be, we build it in size, it's our project. It had for a long time, that's the way government has worked. It's like, we have an idea, it's like the RFP process. It's like, we're going to build something, and we have to build it, we have to own it, we have to control it, we have to not let other people be able to use it. And I think the John's project is really important to changing that mindset, because you really need government buy-in to say, no, we want people to help us, and we are going to try and make the room for that to happen.
Great. Well, if I may, we're going to give the panelists a chance to say anything that they felt has not been said or addressed and is crucial for everyone to hear before they leave. And first, we're going to have two final questions about things that we haven't talked about yet and are not overlapping. Man all the way in the back in black shirt.
So one of the biggest I'll try to first start with the question, why don't you just think about funding smaller projects? Why does everything have to be multi-million-dollar projects? The bigger you make a software project, the more likely it is to fail, and it's because of the people involved. You increase the amount of communications that's necessary between people. Software doesn't happen that way anymore. When you look at startup companies, a few people build something. Why does everything have to be in the millions of dollars?
Let me just answer that very quickly for the panel. Thanks. Let's put it in perspective. I think the RFP that's going to be coming out for the state to substantially revamp their IT infrastructure that's public-facing is for $1.6 million. The Parking Violations Bureau of New York City's basic database for processing summonses just got RFP'd for $85 million. Okay, so the amount of money that's being spent on the kind of systems that Greg, Seth, and the boards of elections and Campaign Finance Board are talking about are very, very small in the world of government contracting. So in terms of the mega contract and the giant contract integration disasters that you see, they're still very small. But it's a good point, but it's still very small scale stuff. So I think they're at the small end of stuff, and the procurements you see from these guys are small to start with. But let's move off of procurement for a second, because I think we agree that there's a massive issue. Sir with sunglasses.
We've talked a lot about open access as it comes out from elections. But I'm curious what's being done on the front end to have access to, for example, geographic information files that can map out data and people can use to build visualizations, that people can use to understand what what elections are even happening in their area. So I'm curious about those earlier parts of the voting process that go into making elections and what's being done to open them access to them as well.
I'm happy to sort of take a crack at that. So, part of the mission and the goal when we were building Turbovote was that when you sign up, we will do everything we can to make sure you don't miss any elections for the rest of your life. And what that means is we actually have to know where all the elections are. And so we're trying to solve this problem that you're talking about. And it is so hard because there is no sort of national data set of all the elections happening. We build it. And we've sort of become specialists in collecting this data from all over the place in order to build applications on top of it. And early next year, actually the first API that will be, the first open API that we'll be launching will be an election date API so that anyone could sort of know where all the elections in the whole country are happening at any time and build tools off of it.
Great. One last question, and someone who, yes, you sir in the hat, please.
This is for everybody in the room, actually. Does anybody know of a break-in, kind of like Target with their credit cards? Has there ever been a break-in with voter information? This is a piggyback off the question about privacy.
Voter security, privacy.
Yes, thank you.
We're not aware of one that's happened in New York City. However, I did read a recent article in the Wall Street Journal that Estonia, that had been the supposed leader in internet voting, that there's skepticism about the level of security, and I think earlier, Seth had mentioned that, and I think he's right. We're not there yet. I think that train is coming down the track. The question is, how long is the track, and when's it going to arrive in the station?
Yeah, there was a minor thing like that in Elections Ontario in Canada last year where, and it was like really just tech, not a hacking, it's like some voter information was just released by the staff by mistake. So that, but that's, that was just, human error. But that did happen in Ontario last year.
So I'm just going to thank everyone enormously for coming tonight. And when you think about what you got here tonight, just a couple observations that you may take for granted, but I don't. Everyone here is a volunteer right now. The folks that work for these government agencies, they're not getting paid right now. They're on their own time. They could be home, doing whatever they do at home, but they're not. They're here with us right now. And that's because they want the change that you want. And I think that's really, really important point, that the people who have the opportunity to change things want to do that. So we should be optimistic about things despite the many obstacles that we face here. And, I'm incredibly appreciative of the efforts of Doug Kellner at the State Board of Elections and Mike here in the city and Amy here in the city. This is great stuff. This is what government should look like for us. These are government servants. They are serving the people. And so, thank you for coming and sharing this night with them, and let's hear it for them.
And I would like to just actually point out, I would like to say thank New York Law School and the fantastic AV folks, and Alan Holder here, who's actually pulled together this entire event for us while he's studying for the LSAT. Thank you, Alan.